What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the Detroit Lions 2024 schedule as well as their record predictions. This video doesn't have a whole lot of scripting to it. I don't have a whole lot of research. This is more just my overall feelings about the team, my overall feelings game by game going through the schedule. And obviously, we'll go a little bit more in depth as the season approaches, as we hear more out of training camp, as we hear more in the preseason. But as an early benchmark, just kind of taking a look at where the Lions are right now, what the expectations are, and potentially how the 2024 season is going to look. So, starting off, we'll take a look at the offense. This is the expected offense that I expect to have big impact on the 2024 season. Obviously, you're going to have some backups make plays as well, but Jared Goff is going to be your quarterback. I think Gibbs finally takes over as the true running back one, with David Montgomery getting just as many carries. David Montgomery, again, might out-carry Jahmyr Gibbs on the season, but I think as far as early downs and impact on the game, I do think Jahmyr Gibbs will take a step forward and be the true running back one early in games. Sam Laporta, obviously your tight end one, with Brock Wright being your tight end two, kind of that backup role player, as we said. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, and Donovan Peoples-Jones as your wide receivers 1, 2, and 3. I think DPJ could potentially be a wide receiver 2 for the Detroit Lions, and obviously you have guys like Khalifa Raymond fighting out for a spot. You have guys like Antoine Green potentially fighting out for a spot. So there is some depth and some competition there at wide receiver. But I would expect those three guys to really kind of rise above the rest and be the three main targets for Jared Goff next season. And then the offensive line is pretty standard. Decker, Glasgow, Ragnow, Zeitler, and Sewell are going to be your starting five on the offensive line. Arguably the best offensive line in all of football. On defense, it gets a little bit different, but again, a little bit of a chalkboardy pick, right? Aiden Hutchinson, I think, will be one edge rusher to start, which is pretty obvious. I think Marcus Davenport will start this season as the second edge rusher, but I think we'll get some rotation with guys like Josh Pascal. We'll get some rotation with guys like James Houston. So the role and the weight isn't entirely on Davenport to be the secondary pass rush, but I do think he will be an early down guy. I think he's the best true edge number 2 that the Detroit Lions have, but I do think there will be a healthy rotation there as well of guys again like Kaminsky, Pascal, Houston. Betts potentially could get a little bit of an impact from the CFL from a season ago, and a couple of other guys to look at as well. Reeder and McNeil are going to be your defensive tackles on the inside. I think Wingo will rotate in as a pass rusher, and I think Martin could potentially get a few reps in games where maybe the score is a little bit out of hand, or late in games where you have it wrapped up and you want to get some development. I do think there will be some opportunity for Broderick Martin to make an impact this season as well, but Reeder and McNeil will be the starters. In the linebacking core, as much as I like Rodriguez and as much as I like Jalen Reeves-Maybin, the starting three linebackers are going to be Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell, and Derek Barnes. Those were our top three linebackers this season that go, and I do not think that anything significantly has changed, but the cornerback room has changed a lot, as Carlton Davis III will be our cornerback one. I would assume Terrion Arnold is cornerback 2, with Brian Branch in the slot, Josephus, free safety, and Ifiatu as the strong safety. So getting on to the actual schedule for the Lions, a couple things to take note of. The Lions have 5 primetime games plus Thanksgiving, so technically 6 primetime games this year. And on top of that, they only have 6 games this year where they kick off at 1 p.m. So it's going to be a very up and down schedule for the Lions. A lot of late nights, a lot of late starts, but a lot of primetime games and a lot of eyes on, as well as the fact that the Lions are favored in 13 of their 17 games this season. So with that being said, let's take a look going game by game at this schedule. But first off, we will move over just a little bit so that we can see the entirety of the schedule. So with that being said, starting off with week 1 with primetime Sunday Night Football versus the team the Lions got their first playoff win against since 1991. I think this will be a very interesting matchup. Obviously, last year in the playoffs, this game came down to a 1-point victory, an essentially game-winning field goal by Michael Badgley. And I think this game could go either way. I truly don't believe that the Lions are guaranteed to win this game in week one, but I do think they will win this game. Obviously, the Rams lost Aaron Donald this season ago. Stafford gets a year older. Their offensive line is good, did improve a little bit, but so did the Detroit Lions pass rush. The Rams really didn't run very well on the Detroit Lions last year, and the Lions run defense got even better this season. So I think that'll be a really interesting factor to see how that plays out. But overall, the Rams killed it. The Rams kept that game close because of the passing attack. And I think with the addition of Carlton Davis, with the addition of Terrion Arnold, I don't think the passing attack will be nearly as effective this season, even though the Rams have an incredible passing attack with Stafford and Kupp and Nakua. I think that the Lions will take this. I think they'll be able to stop the run really, really early, but I could see this game truly going either way. But I will say, with a little bit of Lions bias, knowing that it's opening night, knowing that the crowd is going to be incredible, knowing that they've been looking at this game and they're going to be ready for week one, I do think the Lions take this one in prime time on Sunday. And then they go back to back with playoff opponents from last year as they go right again at home versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, pretty much just repeating the playoff schedule that they ended the year with last year. I think the Buccaneers are a good football team, but they lost their cornerback one this offseason. They're a good football team that I think have a lot of good pieces, but the Lions beat them pretty handedly twice a season ago, and I do think they will be able to beat them a third time in a row to open up the season. I think the Lions do start off 2-0, and I actually think they start off 3-0 this season. Arizona has a couple good pieces. I like what Kyler Murray has. I like, obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. is really good. They have a couple good players on defense like Budda Baker, but overall, they are a football team that was picking third overall, fourth overall this past offseason. They're a team that I think got better, but I don't think is quite ready to compete with a powerhouse in the NFC. I think the Cardinals are probably a 6-7 win team this season, and the Lions should be able to take care of them pretty handedly, and arguably the first true, I would say, lock of the NFL season. There's no such thing as a lock in the NFL, but if I were to put money on one game, the Lions to win, Arizona would probably be up there just because they're not quite at the same stage as a franchise that the Detroit Lions are right now. Seattle, again, is a team that the Lions just don't play very well. It is a late kickoff, I believe an 8:15 kickoff, which is maybe a Sunday night game. I don't remember the exact days for all the primetime games, but Seattle is going to be a late kickoff as well. And for a team that just seems to beat the Lions every single time, it just is a game that I feel like on paper the Detroit Lions should win, but I don't think that they will. Like, for whatever reason, there just seems to be this weird voodoo that whatever the Lions play the Seahawks are going to put up 40, the Lions are going to put up 35, and for whatever reason, in one of the most entertaining games of the year, the Detroit Lions always seem to lose. Whether Seattle has Geno Smith, whether they have Russell Wilson, whatever the case may be, they just seem to fall to Seattle. So in a game that I think the Lions should probably win, it's a game that I think that they might actually fall. It might be a little bit of a trap game going into the bye week. They may overlook it for Dallas, and I think that that might be the first loss of the Detroit Lions regular season. Then they go into the bye week. They have a full 2 weeks to prepare for Dallas, and I think this is a game that the Detroit Lions will win. I think that this is a game that they will be the most prepared for, the most hungry for. This is a game that they wanted last year in the playoffs. They wanted to go back to Dallas and prove that that first game was a fluke. They wanted to win in Dallas, at Dallas, in front of that crowd, and with, the referees as they may be. I do think the Detroit Lions will win this game in Dallas. I know it's been a long time since they beat Dallas. I know that Dallas has had their number recently, but I think especially after the way the game ended last year, with all of the hype surrounding them, with all of, I guess, the pent-up frustration that you could see from the players and the coaches, there's no way that they're not ready for this game. And coming off a week of rest, I do think they will beat Dallas in Dallas to improve to 4-0. And I think going to Minnesota the week after, they will beat Minnesota as well. I like JJ McCarthy. I love Justin Jefferson. I love Jordan Addison. TJ Hawkinson might be returning, but might not quite be 100% quite yet. The interior offensive line is still a little bit shaky. The defense, I think, has got some good pieces with the guys like Will Anderson, obviously, but I don't think is necessarily a complete unit quite yet. I do think the Lions should be able to pass on Minnesota. They should be able to run on Minnesota. They should be able to, again, put up 30, 31 points on the Vikings defense. And with the offensive improvements or defensive improvements from the Lions, I think they should be able to sweep Minnesota this year in a down year as they continue to rebuild their franchise. Same thing with the Titans. The Titans are good. I like Will Levis a lot more in the NFL than I did as a prospect. Hopkins is still really good. I believe in Treylon Burks. I think they have a couple pieces on the offensive line. I know they lost Derrick Henry, so their rushing attack isn't going to be nearly as impactful. Their defense is still missing a lot of pieces. This should be, again, like the Arizona Cardinals game, a game that the Detroit Lions win, putting them currently at 6-1 on the season as they go to Green Bay in Lambeau Field. And I do think that this is going to be a tough game for the Detroit Lions to win. I think the Detroit Lions will split with Green Bay this year. Again, I think they will go 1-1 against Green Bay, whether it be 1-1 at home, 1-1 on the road. It doesn't quite matter to me. For the sake of the video, I will say that in November in Lambeau, they're not going to do it 3 times in a row. Lambeau is still a really hard place to play, a really hard place to win. And I do think that the Packers might take the advantage over the Detroit Lions with just that home field advantage. I think there's a good possibility that the Lions drop their second game of the season all the way in to week 8 or 9 of the season. So right now, sitting at 6-2, sitting at 7-2, they're doing really well, but a couple of losses to the Seahawks and the Packers, teams that they very much could beat, but I don't think that they necessarily will beat. Then you go on the Houston Texans, a primetime, I believe, Thursday night matchup between Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions and CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans. This game is again in Houston in one of the tougher stretches of the Detroit Lions season, right? You're on the road in Dallas, you're on the road in Minnesota, you're on the road at Green Bay, you're on the road in Houston. And I do think it will be a long stretch of games for the Detroit Lions. And I do think this could potentially be the stretch, this middle stretch where they might lose a game or two back to back. And I know they haven't lost back-to-back games in a really long time, but that could potentially be the era. That could potentially be that month of October to early November where, they're at a tough game in Dallas. They're at a tough stadium in Minnesota. They're at a tough game in Green Bay. They're at a really tough game in Houston before they come back home for Thanksgiving for a couple of weeks. I think they might drop 2 in a row, but for the sake of the video and for the fact that the Lions haven't lost back-to-back games since week 6 and 7 of 2022, I think they will bounce back. I think they will beat the Houston Texans. I don't think the Houston rushing attack is efficient as it could be. I think they can make the Texans one-dimensional in a pure passing attack. I do think Houston's defense is good, but I think the Lions offense is better. And I think they're going to play very much in the style of a 2023 Detroit Lions, right? Stop the run early. And yeah, if CJ Stroud has a big day and if Stephon Diggs goes off and Tank Dell and Nico Collins have big days, that's fine. But you're going to have to stop the run early, make the offense one-dimensional. And if CJ Stroud throws 5 touchdowns and they beat you 35-28, you can live with that, right? But the odds are that your defense and your passing defense specifically is not going to allow 5 passing touchdowns a game. And I do think they will make the rushing offense for the Houston Texans less than efficient. So I do think they'll actually take this one in Houston going on a long stretch of games, but potentially being really good. So now you have a win versus the Rams, a win versus the Bucks, a win versus the Cardinals, a win in Dallas, a win in Minnesota versus Tennessee, and now at Houston. And you're sitting at 7-2 on the season going into Thanksgiving, where I do think they will beat the Jaguars. The last time the Jaguars came to Detroit, it wasn't pretty. And I think that they are a better football team than the Jaguars right now. I think they're better in the trenches. I think they'll be able to run on Jacksonville. Jacksonville, by all means, is a very good football team. I do think that Trevor Lawrence is super talented, but I don't love the offense around him. I don't think the offensive line is anything special. I think their wide receivers are good, but I don't think Brian Thomas is necessarily a true wide receiver 1 or an X wide receiver. They have Christian Kirk, who's really solid as a wide receiver 2. I think they have a bunch of wide receiver 2s with Trevor Lawrence right now, and I just don't think the passing attack is going to be good enough to help them win that game. And I think the Lions should win in Jacksonville. They should win in Indianapolis as well, going to 9-2 on the season. This is a team, again, that is really good, especially with Anthony Richardson. They're very dynamic. They're very dangerous. They put up a lot of points, but the odds that Anthony Richardson are injured by week 12 are not zero, right? Just based off of last season, there's a good chance that they go into this game with their backup quarterback. There's a good chance that they go into this game not 100% healthy. And even though I think they're a very good football team, I don't think their defense is very good. And their offense, despite having a ton of weapons and an on paper really strong offensive line and rushing attack, I think it's really going to come down to if Anthony Richardson is healthy, if the offense is clicking. And even though that they are a very good football team, right, had a winning record or very close to a winning record a season ago with Gardner Minshew, I think it's really going to come down to Anthony Richardson's health. But I think pound for pound, the Lions are a better football team. And I think that they will win this game, improving to 9-2 after 11 weeks of the NFL season. Then they go home versus Chicago. They don't play Chicago until very late in the season, giving Chicago time for Caleb Williams to figure it out with Rome Odunze and DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and all of those players. I think Chicago will be a very good team this year. I genuinely do think that Chicago, especially with their weaker schedule, could win 10, maybe even 11 games. I don't think they will quite hit that, but I think that is their ceiling. I think they're going to be right around 9 to 10 wins on the season. And I think at this point in the season, they could have a winning record. They could be I don't know the exact math, but they could be a 7-4 team. They could be a 6-5 team at this point in the season. And I think that they could be pushing for a wild card spot at this point in the year. And this could be a pivotal matchup for the Detroit Lions as we move through and as we kind of get closer to the playoffs. I think Chicago could be one of those dangerous, sneaky wildcard teams that gives a lot of teams trouble down the stretch, especially if Caleb Williams works out to the point that I think he will. I am a believer in Caleb Williams as much as I don't want to be, and I think he will be a very, very strong quarterback for them. I told you that I had the Lions splitting with Green Bay. I had them, I believe, losing in Green Bay, so I have them winning in Detroit in front of their home fans. So now they have losses to Dallas and Green Bay still. That are the only two. I have them being, at this point, I believe 11-2 on the season going into December 15th in week 15. I think they will beat Buffalo. I think Buffalo is a good roster, but Buffalo coming into Detroit, not having a true wide receiver one anymore. I think Keon Coleman's very good, but relying on a rookie wide receiver and a couple of depth guys there isn't going to be great. I think Buffalo will have a winning record. They'll probably have 8, 9, 10 wins when they come into Detroit, but I think Detroit is a better football team, and I do think that they will get to 12-2 on the season. However, I think going into Soldier Field in December, they will drop a game, and I do think they will get their third loss on the season, going to 12-3. I know that they're the Bears, and I know that a lot of people are going to say, oh, the Lions will sweep the Bears. Oh, they're the Bears. A lot of Lions fans don't have a lot of respect for what the Bears are building, but the Bears are a very strong football team, especially if Caleb Williams works out. That defense is legit. That receiving core is incredible. I don't think their offensive line is particularly strong, and I don't think their running game is going to be great. So again, the Lions should be able to make them one-dimensional, especially in December. But in December, in Soldier Field, potentially bad weather, elite Chicago defense, really good quarterback, really good receiving room. I do think that they will drop a game to Detroit. I do think that Detroit will drop a game to Chicago, whether it be in Chicago or in Detroit, kind of like Green Bay. I think they will go 4-2 in the division this year, splitting with both Green Bay as well as Chicago. Dan Campbell has never gone worse than 3-3 in the division, so I don't think that will happen this year. He should have a winning record, but I don't think it's going to be like a 5-1 record or a complete sweep of the division. This is a tough one, and I do think the Lions drop one in December to Chicago before they go back to San Francisco. And again, much like Dallas, I do think that they will win this game. I do think that, having a late kickoff, this is, again, I believe a Sunday night football game, maybe a Thursday night football game. I don't remember exactly what day it'll be played on, but it will be a primetime game. A repeat of the NFC Championship game from last year, potentially for the 1 seed at this point, as the Lions have 12 or 13 wins. San Francisco probably has 12 or 13 wins at this point in the season. This is likely a battle for the 1 seed, if not a battle for the 2 seed. And I do think the Lions will come out on top. I think if there are 2 games the Lions have circled on their calendar this year, it is October 13th in Dallas, and it is December 30th in San Francisco. And I think they will win both of those games. I think they will be prepared for both of those games. Obviously, last year, San Francisco killed the Detroit Lions in the second half with their passing attack. I think they're going to come out much like they did in the NFC Championship game. They're going to come out swinging. They're going to put up points early. And I think this time they're going to hold on to the lead. And I don't think that they're going to let it go, meaning they'll probably go into week 18 versus Minnesota playing some backups. We'll probably see Hendon Hooker if this is the case. We will probably see guys that are a little bit younger. Maybe Sony Vaki gets a lot of touches at running back. Potentially guys like Khalif Raymond and Antoine Green get a look as the wide receivers 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 in the offense, right? Potentially getting some looks at Giovanni Manu at tackle or Christian Mahogany on the interior or Kingsley Egukam at center, right, for the future purposes. Getting some looks at maybe Ennis Rakestraw if he doesn't get a ton of reps throughout the season. Getting looks at, potentially other guys and other young players. Broderick Martin could potentially play a lot in this game. I think that week 18 will not be a make or break. I don't think it'll necessarily be it'll make the playoffs or they won't make the playoffs type of a deal. Again, it could be very indicative for the 1 seed potentially. It might be very impactful for whether the Lions make the 1 seed or they do not. But if the Lions have the 1 seed locked up, which at this point they would have about 12, 13 wins on the season, I do think that they should probably be the 1 seed, if not the 2 seed, and they should be hosting quite a few playoff games this season. Overall, I think it is a very tough schedule for the Detroit Lions. A lot of primetime games, a lot of expectations. Obviously, LA made the playoffs last year, as did the Buccaneers, as did the Cowboys, as did the Packers, which we have to play twice. So you have 1 playoff team, 2 playoff team, 3 playoff team, 4 playoff team in the Packers, 5 playoff teams in the Texans, an above 500 team in Jacksonville, a really close to 500 team in the Colts, another playoff team in Green Bay again. You had Buffalo in the playoffs last year. You had San Francisco in the playoffs last year. So 8 of your 18 games are against playoff teams from a season ago. And if you look at teams that could make the playoffs this year, I think Seattle has a chance. I think that the Colts have a chance. I think that the Jaguars have a chance. I think the Bears have a chance to make the playoffs again. Really, realistically, there are 2 or 3 teams on this schedule that I think do not have a chance to make the playoffs, and that is probably the Cardinals and the Titans, probably the Vikings as well. But 4 games of your 18 are non-playoff teams, non-500 teams, that's not competitive, but teams that probably won't go very far this season. But I do think that 12 or 13 wins should be the expectation. They went 12-5 a season ago, and I don't see them losing more than 3 or 4 games, right? Even if, let's say, they lose to every good team that they play, like really, really good team, right? Let's say they lose to LA in a worst case scenario. LA, they go to Dallas and they lose. They go to Green Bay and they lose. And they lose back-to-back games again for the first time in over 2 years to the Texans. And then they lose, let's say, 1 to the Bears, 1 to let's say they even drop 1 to, obviously the Bears, I guess, is 5. San Francisco is 6. I think at a worst case scenario, you lose every tight game. You lose every game versus a true playoff contender that'll push you. That's 6 losses. That's 11-6. That's probably still good enough for a playoff spot, although probably not good enough for the division this year. So in a worst case scenario, you're looking at 11-6. I think like I said, I think you do win in Dallas. I think you do win in San Francisco. I think you win one of Green Bay in Houston, and you're looking at a pretty realistic 12-5, 13-4 record with a playoff team that was so close to a Super Bowl a season ago. With all of that being said, that is life for you guys today. I do think the Lions are the most complete team in the NFC North, potentially the most complete team in the NFL, but the division's very tight. The division's very competitive. The roster is really, really good, but the schedule is really, really tough. So with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. That is my official early 2024 record prediction for the Detroit Lions. I was a game off last year saying they went 11-6. They went 12-5. Hopefully this year I'm pretty close as well again. With all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know your record predictions down in the comments below. Be very curious what you guys have to say and what you guys think. But with all of that being said, that is all for you guys right now. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.